Beeler.
Welcome to the underground. This is not a basement. Looks like a basement, smells like a basement, but no, this is the tide flat they built the city on. And they existed at this level from 1852 to 1889. Now look at the photograph, 1876. If we could go back in time, we would be in this photograph standing right there, right now, outside. You are here. The street photographed here was First Avenue, when it was located right down here at our feet. How did we get off this sidewalk that we're standing on onto that new sidewalk we just walked off of? Well, that's the story, isn't it? And to understand it, we have to go back to the fire. Everything changed on June the 6th, 1889, when there was a fire in a cabinet maker's shop on First and Madison, right here, right below this UFO. Okay, here's the truth. The cabinet maker was heating a pot of glue. Back then, glue came in a brick. You take the brick, you put it in a pot, you put the pot on a stove, and you melt it down. Now you can slather it on whatever you want. Well, he forgot about it. It boiled over, hit the stove, and caught on fire. And he panicked. He threw a bucket of water on what was essentially a grease fire. So it splattered onto a floor which was covered with sawdust soaked in turpentine. Got a great start. Progresses 3 stores down to a warehouse that had just received 550 barrels of whiskey. Can we have a moment of silence? Well, now the fire's out of control. We tried to fight it. Long lines of men passing buckets of water from alley bay to the fire. You know the old bucket brigade? And that worked until the fire started shooting back, because a lot of the stores back then sold gunpowder, live ammunition, and dynamite. Well, when it started shooting at them, these firefighters remembered one very important fact, that they were volunteers. They ran away, and 12 hours later, 33 square blocks, all of downtown Seattle, burnt to the ground. Nobody died, which I think is amazing. Next day, there was a town meeting. It was an open-air meeting. And they decided, hey, this is our chance to regrade, and let's do it right. Let's not use sawdust. Let's go to the hills. Let's dig this dirt up and bring it down here to Low Flat Pioneer Square and build ourselves up. Get above the highest of tides and then rebuild the city. That building behind you was built right after the fire. It rises out of the ashes like a phoenix. That's a 6-story brick building, and we are looking at the exterior of the first floor. And when that building was completed, guess what? You're still on the sidewalk. There's still gray skies above, and the street is still right down here at our feet. So, nothing has changed. We're still living on a tide flat. The streets are still flooding. The only difference, the buildings aren't made out of wood. But the city, not giving up on that idea of getting out of the mud, did something incredible. They came to the edge of every sidewalk, to what they clearly owned, the streets. And they started building these retaining walls. This is an original retaining wall. And this is so important to the story, I want you all to repeat. Retaining wall. Retaining wall. Thank you, class. This retaining wall encircles the entire city block, like a wall around a castle. Then they went across the street over there and did the same thing. And they continued this process, encircling 33 square blocks. So where you once had a street down here at your feet, you now have 2 big retaining walls sticking up into the air, one on either side of the street. They're raising the streets. But to complete that project, they have to fill in between the walls, right? Because between this retaining wall and the one way across the street, it's hollow where the old street used to be, so to fill it up, they started throwing debris from the fire in between the walls until they ran out. And then they started using dirt, rock, sawdust, garbage. They found old rowing boats in between these walls. There's evidence dead horses were thrown in there. They filled it almost to the top and started laying out the new pipes, water, sewage, and drainage pipes. And then they paved over the top of this new raised street. So when this work was completed, here's what you had. 6-story building behind you. You're still on the sidewalk. There's still gray skies above, but now here. Up here is our new street level.
That's weird.
Do you see a problem with the street being up here and the sidewalk being down here? Yeah. Well, excuse me, how do I cross the street? Well, the city thought of that and put ladders at the end of every block. Follow me, I'll show you. Welcome to the corner of First and Yesler. You can clearly see the retaining wall circling the block right there. That's the intersection. That's where the ladder used to stand that you had to climb to cross the street. Finally, they put in the new sidewalks. That's the sidewalk we just walked down. And here's how they did it. In between the I-beams, they built brick arches. They're flat on top, that's the sidewalk. But they're arched underneath for strength. And they're very strong. They've survived 3 major earthquakes with no damage. Then they put in skylights to allow natural light to light these underground passageways. Most of these original skylights are gone, so appreciate the ones we have. 90% of them are long gone. And Seattle is the city it is today in large part because of the Klondike Gold Rush. But then in 1907, the underground, all of it, 33 square blocks just like this, condemned because of the bubonic plague. They called it Mill Street because it led to the mill, which sat on the water's edge. Ships would parallel park right there during high tide. Mill Street was lined with logs, slicked with dogfish oil, so lumberjacks could skid logs down the road to the mill. Thus the nickname Skid Road, which later becomes Skid Row. That negative term was born right here in Seattle, but it started as a logging term. Kind of interesting. Follow me this way. Come join these fellas, belly up to the bar. Welcome to the Moses Korn, that's a man's name, the Moses Korn Mechanic Store. Dry goods, first floor, we're inside for the first time. When he rebuilt this building, he took the opportunity to make it 1 story taller, because he could. And he moved this nice entryway up to the 2nd floor. Why did he do that? Exactly, he knew the plan, right? The streets are gonna be raised and the sidewalk will join the building right there. So you better have an entrance ready to go. Look at the dirt streets. They flooded regularly, not every day, but on the highest of tides, the streets would be inundated with salt water. You can see a chuck hole lined with stakes, so that when the tide rolls in, you can still identify where the hole is and avoid it. It was always full of tide water, and kids would raft back and forth across it all day long for fun until one day a little boy fell off his raft and he didn't know how to swim. And he drowned. They found his body later that day at a depth of 8.5 feet in the middle of the street. It was a tragedy, and it was a huge embarrassment because the next morning banner headlines read, "Boy drowns in Seattle street," which made us the laughingstock of the territory. And to make matters worse, the editorial section of that edition did not demand the filling of that hole. They demanded swimming lessons for all first graders. And that life preservers be posted at critical intersections in downtown Seattle. It's a true story. The city offered a dime reward for a rat tail. So what you do is you see a rat, you kill it, bang, cut off its tail, bring the tail to City Hall. They pay you a dime. 50,000 rats' tails were turned into City Hall. Now that sounds ludicrous, but cities around the world were doing it, and some still do. About 13 years ago, I'm giving this part of my tour, and this woman got really excited, said, ooh, I'm from Viola, Minnesota, we still do that. I said, really, please explain. She goes, well, we have a summer festival that we call the Gopher Count. All year long, kids in our community collect rats' tails and gopher paws, and during the summer festival, we pay them just as we used to in years gone by. Now, what do we learn from this? Things are pretty slow in Viola, Minnesota.
Beeler.